Welcome to the first guest interview on Wind, Waves and Wells with Joe, the podcast where we dive into the heart of the energy industry, onshore and offshore, with a mix of stories, insights and a bit of humour into this vast industry. Today I am thrilled to have Chris joining me on the show. I met Chris when I was working over in Taiwan back in 2023. I was out there working on my own for one company and Chris was the client rep on the project. We both got on with each other very early on, obviously both being on our own, so we clicked pretty quickly. He's really someone who's got quite a vast majority of experience in the wind industry predominantly, and I've learned a lot off as well. So we're going to dig deep into his career. We go through his journey in the industry and the challenges he's faced, and also his views on the sector, predominantly where it's at and where it's going. So get ready for a very insightful and entertaining conversation with someone who knows the energy industry very well, especially the wind, and I welcome Chris. Bestie, my yin to my yang, the cocoa to my pops.
Bing bang bosh.
Thank you so much
for
coming on. You're the first of what I'm hoping is going to be a good few, but it's not easy to get people on, so I do appreciate it. So,
no, you're welcome.
Before you meet your best friend Joe, where was Chris?
Well, it's a pleasure to be on this podcast, Joe. Bit of background for myself. I was born into a military family, so I moved around a lot, went to many schools, ended up at boarding school. I went to a private public school, Duke of York's, and then I joined the engineers, Royal Engineers. Once I completed that, I worked in the construction in Germany. I stayed in Germany, and I got my first taste of crane operating. Loved cranes from that day. I think it was about 9-10 years I operated tower cranes, mobile cranes, crawler cranes, and then eventually went through lift supervisor courses, AP courses, did that for a few more years, gaining the necessary experience, especially with the heavy lift supervisor role. That gave me some really good experience with wind turbine components, etc. in Germany, in Denmark, Esbjerg. So, yeah, that's a bit about myself.
So I take it after that obviously leads you down the fantastic path that we're here for, which was your offshore career. Where did it start?
Yeah, well, my first foray into the offshore wind industry was 2009. I worked in Denmark as a heavy lift supervisor. We were loading components onto the vessels, the installation vessels, and that was for the Hornsworth 2, Greater Gabbard and Gunfleet Sands projects, all out of Esbjerg, and I was the AP heavy lift supervisor. And on doing that, through my LinkedIn profile, I got headhunted by Eni Petroleum, the Italian petroleum company, for a role as HSE lifted advisor offshore in Kazakhstan on the huge Kashagan oil project. So that was a wake-up call. Off I went to Kazakhstan, plus 50 degrees in the summer, minus 50 in the winter. So that was a wake-up call. But it gave me an extra 2 years, a good 2 years experience in a management role, HSE department, heavy lifting. I didn't particularly enjoy Kazakhstan, but the experience was fantastic. And from there, I was headhunted again for a heavy lift supervisor role in Germany, based out of Bremerhaven, on Demi's new jackup vessel, the Innovation. So I was the first heavy lift supervisor on there. And that was loaded and installed in tripod foundations for the great Global Tech 1 project. Sorry, Joe, I forgot about that one.
No.
GT1. That's how I got into it. And on completing that role, I then got asked by the client to go and work for them as a client representative offshore. And that was in beginning of 2014. So that's 11 years ago now, to the date, pretty much to the day. So 11 years as a client rep.
Right, so we'll scroll back a wee bit, because obviously you're mainly in wind, but in there is obviously the industry that is probably more demonised now more than ever, the oil and gas industry. When you went into it in Kazakhstan, obviously it's probably not the most pleasant of experiences, I can't imagine. What was your views on that in terms of a whole? I mean, how did you find working in an oil industry, especially coming from the wind? Obviously myself as well, being in the wind and oil and gas. What did you see in the oil and gas industry that you don't really see in the wind industry? Or what was better, what was worse, and why did you not hang around in the oil and gas for that long?
It was my first outlook on oil and gas, so I can't really compare it to anything else. But working with many expats from all different people, different cultures, getting to talk to them, there was a downward trend in the oil and gas industry, especially in the UK. Hence why a lot of the expats were going abroad. I never had that experience of oil and gas out of Aberdeen, like many of the guys did. Some seriously experienced guys working in Kazakhstan. But I can't really answer that, Joe, because I didn't really have any experience in oil and gas before or even after. I just did that 2 years. And I didn't have that much experience in the wind either at that day. I just had the 2 years of loading components and going offshore in 2009 and 10. So, again, not much to compare it to from my personal opinions, but I do know from hearsay and from talking with the guys that oil and gas, especially in the UK, was on a downward trend. But it's picking up again now, slowly but surely. But a lot of the guys have come from oil and gas to the renewable industry, mainly for the security, and obviously the money's pretty good as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that probably leads us in actually perfectly into what we're going to discuss now is what you are more specialised in, which is what you do is the wind industry. I mean, that's where we first laid eyes on one another back in 2023 on the Zong Name project. So obviously now you're based in Taiwan. Do you want to just touch a little bit on the kind of industry size over in Taiwan and Asia? I mean, obviously we speak, every now and again about the kind of industry and where it's going over there. I mean, just to people who are fresh out of the box and don't really keep an eye on it, what is the kind of construction phases that are going on over in Asia at the moment? I mean, who's jumping on board? Who's going for it?
Well, the wind industry's been going on for many years in Europe, 20 odd years. So the experience has been brought to Asia, and we're now seeing that fruition. It's really picking up now in Taiwan, especially, but also Japan. I've just come back from a job in South Korea for their first offshore wind project, which I was privileged to be a part of. The Philippines are ready to kick off, Vietnam. Um, Japan is big. Asia's really picking up on Europe. They're catching up, and they will catch up sooner or later. And for us, especially for me, living in Taiwan now, there's a good few projects ahead. I think I'm going to be busy for at least the next 3 years. For someone new, for the newbies out there, it's still an industry in its infancy,
Yeah.
let's be honest. All right, UK, Denmark, Germany, especially UK, 20 odd years experience, but the rest of the world, it's in the infancy. So for me, now's the time. If you're a youngster, now's the time to get into the wind industry and knuckle down, get some qualifications, get some experience behind you, work your way up the ladder. It's a good time.
Yeah, that leads perfectly actually into my next question. How have you actually seen the industry evolve since you first started, back when you were a young whippersnapper, I'm going to say?
The sheer size of the components, the changes from when I first started in 2009, 2.4 megawatt turbines, and now we're looking at 16 megawatt turbines. So with that sheer size, 116-meter long blades, I mean, we were in awe of 34, 36-meter blades. Now we're looking at 120 around that. It's crazy, the sheer size, which in turn means you need a big vessel. That's the problem now as we sit here. Wind farm operators, wind farm owners, construction companies are struggling to sign contracts with vessel companies because they're so busy. They just don't have the vessels. So construction yards in Korea, in Singapore, in China are flat out busy. Dubai, all these places, building these super sized vessels, like the vessel that I'm currently on, the Green Jade, a 216-meter long, 4,000-ton crane. This is just for basic monopile installation and jacket installation. So yeah, that's the biggest changes over the last 15 years, the sheer size and cost of these things, and now the lack of vessels, and also lack of experienced people, because there's so many projects. Many of the experienced guys are flat out busy, so they're screaming for experienced guys.
Yeah, and I mean, that vessel that we actually met each other on, that was pretty much brand new straight out the box, and it was thrown into a fairly big, I wouldn't say big, but a decent sized project. And obviously, as we found out, that these vessels, are not exactly small little tugboats. I mean, they are monsters with huge cranes on them, sophisticated DP systems. I mean, some are using jackups, but from the experience, especially in the foundation side of things, is how much longer can we get away with jackups due to the fact that some of these monopiles are absolutely enormous. I mean, the project over in another one that you'll be familiar with as well, in the Yunlin. I mean, some of those monopiles are over 2,000 tons. I mean, jackup cranes they're starting to struggle to keep up with some of these things. So I mean, it's almost they've got to evolve while they're infant, while they're producing, and there's quite a lot going on at once. That does leave, a lot of problems that are going to
There
come with
actually
it.
there are actually no jackup vessels that can install these 2,500 ton monopiles.
Mm.
They have to be done by floating DP vessels now. Um, I think 2,000 ton is the largest capacity crane on a jackup, and even that's not big enough now. So yeah, it's a difficult situation for these companies to be in, and hence why they seem to be leaning towards jackets on these floating vessels. And the jack-up vessels like the Innovation, the Osprey, these large jack-ups, they'll be used mainly for wind turbine component installation and operation and maintenance.
I mean, hopefully they don't get too much bigger either, because then that'll put them totally out of sync with it.
Yeah,
Um,
but all these vessels, sorry Joe, all these vessels are being upgraded. Every one of them is being upgraded. Bigger cranes, they're trying to keep up, but it's difficult.
Yeah, no, definitely, and We'll take this back away from the current industry at the moment. COVID-19 seems a few years ago now, but how did that affect you? Did you get stuck anywhere? Obviously, there was plenty of stories, nightmares, especially over in Asia, due to people being stuck on vessels for long periods of time. But how did that affect you, and what did you see in terms of how it impacted the offshore projects that were going on, worldwide, so to speak?
COVID had a massive impact on, I think, probably every project around the world. Quarantines, navigating the complex travel documentation, avoiding interactions with non-offshore personnel presented substantial challenges. But trying to maintain that bubble once we got on board, the jabbed or the quarantine guys were in a bubble, and trying to, especially when we were sailing back into to port, it was difficult for everyone. While it wasn't so bad in Europe, it was a bit lax. Early conditions in Taiwan were particularly challenging, and like you say, a nightmare for a lot of people. The 2-week quarantine in government facilities was probably worse than UK prisons. It was really primitive. Some of these guys were in small rooms with a window that didn't open. You couldn't go out of your room. There was armed guards, and it was really like going back 50 years, 60 years. It was bad. I was quite fortunate. At the initial stages of COVID, I was working in Holland, in the Netherlands, and I had all the right travel documentation, so I could travel on the North Sea ferry from Hull to Rotterdam. I was always getting questioned because I was the only car on the vessel. It was all trucks, so I was the only traveller, if you like. So I was always getting pulled documentation and being really, really thoroughly checked, but I got away with it every time. And then once we did it was a bit lax actually in Holland. We did 3 or 4 days of quarantine, and then Bing Bang Bosch all together on the vessel, party time. So that wasn't so bad, but Taiwan, I went to Singapore, it wasn't too bad, but Taiwan was horrendous in the early stages.
Yeah, I did hear some absolute brutal stories. Boys getting stuck on for about 7 months or so as well. I mean, it was an incredibly tough time, and I take it. I mean, ultimately, the challenges after that. I mean, you must have taken on some resilience and adaptability though after the experience, did you?
Yeah, it didn't fundamentally change who I am now. I have a lot of respect for the logistics companies now, a heck of a lot of respect for what they had to deal with back then for all the people. But it made me appreciate their efforts to keep the projects running smoothly. We didn't stop for a day, which was good.
And that leads quite nicely into this next question, I guess. The mental health aspect of offshore, it's not exactly we're not exactly the most open-minded and open-talking people in the offshore world. From my experience, there's still the old, how we say, dinosaur mentality where you keep it to yourself. But how do you think you've been affected mentally over the last few years since you started offshore, and just in general from the whole shebang, so to speak?
Personally, the mental health challenges, it's got its pluses, it's got its minuses, it's got its positives and its negative effects. Working offshore can have both of those effects on one's well-being. So Some of the things that come to mind, positive financial benefits. Obviously, offshore jobs come with competitive salaries and benefits, which can lead to improved financial stability and security for workers and their families, which is really important. I think that's what most of the guys do this job for that financial benefit. And also work-life balance. For many workers, the structured rotation, so doing 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 3 on, 3 off, or what we do at the minute over here is 6 on, 3 off. But it provides opportunities for extended time off, allowing for quality time with your family, leisure activities, hobbies, etc. And being part of a close-knit team in remote settings, that creates a strong bond and a sense of camaraderie. This could contribute positively to emotional well-being as well, and skill development. Working in these challenging environments can enhance your skills, promote professional growth, and boost confidence. That's the positives. But the negatives, the isolation, extended times away from your family and friends, that can lead to feelings of loneliness and isolation, especially true during longer shifts or further offshore you go, the more remote you are. Stress and fatigue. The majority of people offshore, they do 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. It's long days, so the demanding nature of the offshore work can lead to physical and mental fatigue, and that can affect the overall well-being. The need to remain alert and focused, potentially hazardous conditions, that also adds to the stress. We're in a real high stress environment, working offshore. It is weather dependent, so during bad weather, the guys can come in and relax a little bit.
Yeah. No,
Health risks.
I think that's definitely something actually I have noticed in the wind industry is I think like I think especially if you're someone listening in, you're working in the North Sea at the moment and you're lucky to get one of those cushy 2 and 3s, or even in Norway 2 and 4s, and I think you're kind of probably listening in and going, well, it's not too bad you get the 2 and 3, but I think what I have noticed in the wind sector especially is the rotations are a lot longer. I'm currently on a 5 and 5 at the moment, which is, I mean, don't get me wrong, 4 weeks I think is, a good balance, but you do find that, some boys in particular, start dropping off the last week, and obviously that is a big change into, someone doing a 3 and 3 or a 2 and 3 and whatnot. But I mean, how do you find, what's your coping mechanisms for when you're offshore? I mean, that's the ultimate thing is what gets you through, what gets Chris through the day?
Staying connected is probably the most important thing for me. Regular communication with my partner, family, friends, with phone calls, and with technology nowadays. The Wi-Fi's sometimes hit and miss, but 9 times out of 10 you can get a decent enough Wi-Fi connection for a WhatsApp video chat. Social media, everybody's on Facebook,
Yeah.
everybody's on Instagram. So staying connected is probably the most important thing. Prioritizing self-care. I mean, if you engage in regular exercise, maintain a healthy diet, get some good sleep when you can. You get 12 hours off. Once you've been to the gym for an hour, had something to eat, shower, get you 8 hours sleep if you can, even 7 hours, but try as much as you can to rest. Support, like you hit the nail on the head. It's a bit of a taboo subject, mental health. But I'm one, if you use the resources, some employers do provide some resources and help manage emotional challenges, but like as I mentioned earlier, the camaraderie, you soon make some good mates, and you can see if someone's down in the dumps. You can pull them aside and say, look, if you want to have a chat, they either do or they don't. And keep an eye on these guys. 9 times out of 10, they'll snap out of it. They'll have a bit of a laugh and we move on. There's been some sad cases offshore over the years, and sometimes you think, I wish I'd spotted the telltale signs. But it is difficult if people don't want to talk. But I find that's one of the biggest changes over the years. People are more willing to open up a little bit more than what they used to. I wouldn't have dreamt 10 years ago when I came into or 15 years ago, I wouldn't have dreamt of talking to anyone that I was feeling depressed. Depressed was not a word anyone spoke about. But now people are talking about it all the time, and I embrace that, I really do.
Yeah, I certainly think in the wind industry, though, I think with the younger kind of generation coming through, I think it is spoken a lot more about. I mean, oil and gas, again, there is still a lot more prehistoric mentalities in there. And so it doesn't really, from my last experience, and it doesn't really come into fruition, so to speak. But I think you're totally right. I think making sure you can make the most of your 5 weeks off. I like to always say, like, you're not getting all your 5 or 6 or whatever you're doing when you're offshore. I like to think and always say, actually, you're never getting these days back. Once they're gone, they're gone. So if you don't make the most of your time while you're working away, no one wants to be away. If we could all get paid the same money from staying at home, you would. But it is
Yeah.
it's certainly one of them. You don't want a
But
bad apple.
also the employers provide on these vessels now, especially the more modern vessels, fantastic activity like gyms. The gyms are fully stacked, cinemas, table tennis, even musical instruments now. We have a band on board our vessel. So a bit of music, karaoke, especially for the Malaysians, the Filipinos, they love their karaoke. So there's a karaoke machine with speakers and TVs. So all these things are now being provided by the employers and by the contractors. So I think if you can find a way to engage in enjoyable and fulfilling activities, both onshore and offshore, this can promote a positive mindset. So overall, working offshore, it does present unique challenges, but if you address these, stay connected, prioritize your self-care, seek support, maintain your hobbies and interests, then it can lead to a positive experience.
Yeah, I think you pretty much answered my next question. Really, is the companies you're working for, how much do they encourage, looking after your kind of well-being when you're away, and you have kind of, pretty much knocked every question out there for, I mean, like you say, the gyms now, I think it's quite a big thing. I also think Wi-Fi is quite crucial. Thank God for Elon.
100%.
He's definitely sorted that problem out, especially on the vessel side of things. But yeah, I mean, that's touched into nicely now for me to kind of do a bit of reflecting on your career. I mean, memorable experiences. What's some standout memories from your time offshore? And I mean, what's your proudest achievement along the way as well?
So many memories, good memories and bad memories, Joe.
Obviously, I'll be at the top
Kazakhstan
of
was
that
one
list.
of
Meeting Joe Leather would have been number one, but after number one, what's number two? I mean, it doesn't get much better than meeting this guy.
apart from meeting my bestie. So many memories, Joe. I think for me, being repeatedly asked or recommended to come back to a new project, but for the same client. So being repeatedly asked to work for these guys, that's a standout part of my career. Because to me, it means that I'm doing a good job, or I think I'm doing a good job, and so do they, representing them in all aspects. So that's something I'm proud of. Proudest achievement, I think completing nearly every project I've been on, I've been from start to finish and without serious injury, not just to myself, but the guys on the vessel, um, and no damage to assets. A little bit of paint damage in that we don't count, but safety is at the forefront of my role, and I'll continue to do it that way because I've been studying on my downtime, especially in COVID, with a lot of time to study. So I did a lot of health and safety, NEBOSH, for instance. I did my NEBOSH, and then I did a certificate as well, and then I did my level 6 occupational health and safety diploma. Um, that kept me busy. I was quite proud of that, and also a level 6 and 7 in senior construction management. So I didn't waste my time, and I think that's really important for guys working offshore when they're away to focus on something like studying. That was my hobby, to be fair.
No, I can certainly vouch for you on that because when first met you, you said the exact same thing. Do what you can, get as many. I think if I remember right, if you don't buy a ticket, you can't get on the bus. So I thought, you're pretty true to your word on that, especially from my experiences with you. So, I mean, we're coming towards the end of what's been a fantastic conversation. But what advice would you give to someone who is considering a career, not just in the wind but in the energy industry in general, whether it is offshore or onshore? What's your kind of advice? What's your tips? What would you tell the younger generation that are coming through?
I'd tell them just to go for it. If they don't mind being away for weeks at a time, working with multicultural teams, if they get on with people, and don't be fussy about food. Hit and miss offshore, as you know, Joe.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be poor. If you can get away with these things, then go for it. It's not for everyone, but if you give it 100%, it's definitely a rewarding career.
Yeah, and I mean, how do they prepare for it? How do they get themselves ready, for the challenges and the opportunity, of potentially getting offshore?
Well, actually, I got a friend of mine's friend contacted me. He's in the Royal Marines and he's due to come out next month. So he was given my contact details and spoke to me last week for some advice. And I told him the same: take as many courses as you can. The army are paying for most of it anyway. So on his resettlement. So he's doing that. He's got an interview now. I got him into contact with some senior managers from Siemens SGRE. and he's got an interview in 2 days' time, which is good. So keep fit, keep healthy, go for it.
Yeah, no,
You won't be disappointed.
no, 100%. I think you're right there. Just keep throwing CVs out
Keep
there,
learning
and,
as well.
and keep nailing the recruiters. And at the end of the day, it's their job to do recruiting. And yeah, just keep throwing everything at it. And so here comes the question I'm going to be asking everyone that comes on this show: is if you had your time again and knew what you did now, would you have gone down the same path?
100%. Definitely, I would have. Yeah. I've got no regrets, and I'm certainly proud of where I am in the industry. And all the years previous to that have got me to this stage. I can't really go any higher. I'm really happy where I am. I enjoy it. So, no regrets.
Yeah, nearly completed it, Chris. Nearly completed it. A few more years and then hanging up the boots.
Oh, yeah, I think another 3, 4 years maybe. We'll see how Taiwan pans out. I think I'm covered for 2025, 6 and 7. And then we'll see how that'll be 60 then. But shit the bed. I'll be 60, Joe. I think I'm looking at retiring probably around 61, 62. So another 4 or 5 years, and I should be good to put the hard hat up.
Yeah, plenty in the tank then. Plenty in the tank.
Plenty in the tank, sir.
Right, Chris. Well, that's been fantastic. I've really, really appreciated you coming on. And I just want to say a big thank you to you as well, because like I say, first on the show, so it means a lot to me that you've made the effort to come on for me and that you threw your neck out straight for me. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, Joe.
And speak to you soon.
Real pleasure. All right, buddy.
Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers. For this episode of Wind, Waves and Wells with Joe, a huge thanks to Chris for sharing his insights and his stories. And remember, whether it's onshore, offshore or somewhere in between, the energy industry is always moving. And we're here to bring you along for the ride. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Got a story, question or a topic you'd like to cover? Reach out to us and we'd love to hear you, or even better, get on the show. Until next time, stay safe out there and we go again.